Before he could even complete his second sentence, American television and radio broadcaster Joel Osteen abruptly cut him off with a sharpness that left no room for argument. "You don't get to lecture me on the very principles of spiritual success," he barked, his voice rising in volume and his tone already tinged with defensiveness. His words spilled out with a force that suggested he was eager to dominate the conversation, not engage in a meaningful exchange. American actor Jonathan Roumie, however, remained remarkably composed amidst his aggressive outburst. His gaze was steady, his lips pressed together in a calm, controlled manner as he patiently waited for his turn to speak. Yet, Osteen did not pause. Instead, he continued to push forward, rambling incoherently, overlapping Roumie's voice with his own. Every time Roumie attempted to interject or respond, he delivered a sharp retort as if trying to silence him altogether. Despite his relentless interruptions, Roumie's demeanor did not waver. When he finally opened his mouth to speak again, he addressed him with quiet confidence, saying, "I'm not here for a lecture either, Mr. Osteen." His tone was measured, calm, and firm, an assertion of his right to be heard. But Osteen paid him no mind. He talked right through Roumie's words, now louder and more insistent, as if sheer volume could somehow guarantee victory in this verbal duel. The atmosphere in the studio grew tense, thick enough that a producer watching from behind the glass muttered under his breath, "He's spiraling already." What had been intended as a serious discussion about the spiritual impact of American actor Jonathan Roumie's work quickly devolved into an on-air ambush. Osteen had initially invited Roumie to discuss his public advocacy, but what was unfolding was far from a fair exchange of ideas. It was rather an aggressive attempt by Osteen to undermine Roumie's credibility, a takedown staged in front of the cameras. However, this effort was failing because Roumie remained unfazed. He did not flinch, did not raise his voice to match Osteen's volume, and did not beg for the opportunity to speak. Instead, he simply waited, embodying patience and resilience. At last, Osteen paused to take a sip of water, perhaps half mocking, half daring him to seize the moment. Seizing the opportunity, Roumie leaned in slowly, his voice cutting through the noise with deliberate precision. He asked, "Would you like me to answer something, or are you just interviewing yourself today?" His words hit the mark, sharp and direct, causing a collective gasp from those behind the broadcast booth. Not because they were loud, but because they were piercing and impactful. Osteen, eager to regain control, opened his mouth to deliver another jab, but something in the room shifted. The equilibrium had just tilted and he sensed it. Even though only 3 minutes had passed since the start of the interview, he was already losing his grip on the situation. In the hours leading up to this tense exchange, Osteen had approached it with a sense of confidence, almost as if he had already claimed victory. He had skimmed through a few headlines about American actor Jonathan Roumie, dismissed them dismissively, and instructed his producers not to worry. "He's just another actor spouting feel-good platitudes with no depth," he had said confidently. "I'll handle him." His team had tried to warn him that this time was different. Roumie was not coming in to play defense or merely react to his attacks. But Osteen, brimming with arrogance, waved off their concerns, clinging to the same tactics he had relied on for years. Talk louder to dominate, control the tempo of the conversation, and drown out opponents with his own conviction. Meanwhile, on the opposite side of the city, Roumie was preparing in his own way, methods that starkly contrasted with Osteen's. He was not memorizing canned talking points or relying on rehearsed lines. Instead, he was studying transcripts of Osteen's most confrontational interviews, analyzing his patterns. He paid close attention to how Osteen cut off guests, how he repeated certain phrases to unsettle opponents, and how he used rapid speech to throw off calm voices. He practiced not just to answer questions, but to handle interruptions, knowing full well that his responses would be challenged and his composure tested. His team took turns shouting over his responses, mocking, spinning, and jabbing, all to simulate the chaos he might face. Yet, he remained steady each time, his focus unwavering. His goal was not merely to win the debate, but to hold his ground, exposing Osteen's tactics in the process. When he finally stepped into the studio, he didn't just appear prepared. He looked comfortable, as if he belonged there. No notes, no entourage nearby, just his posture, his presence, and a clear plan of action. As he entered, Osteen glanced up from his desk and offered him a tight, somewhat smirking smile, more of a sneer than a greeting, signaling that he was already trying to assert dominance in this encounter. Roumie responded with a subtle nod, then smoothly took his seat directly opposite him, his posture composed yet relaxed, arms resting naturally and back held with impeccable straightness. What Osteen was unaware of in that moment was that the rules of their engagement had irrevocably shifted. This would no longer be a mere display of superficial politeness or rehearsed civility. No, this encounter was about exposing truths, revealing realities beneath the surface, and Roumie was prepared for this new dynamic. Osteen, without any preliminary easing into the conversation, plunged straight into the heart of the matter, abandoning politeness and civility as if they were mere optional accessories. His voice cut sharply through the air as he declared, "Your public portrayal of faith is a disaster." His tone sharp and uncompromising. He followed with a pointed accusation as if it were a question, but in reality it was an assertion. "You want to preach morality from your Hollywood pedestal, while real people are out here struggling with doubt." His words were delivered with conviction, leaving little room for doubt. Roumie opened his mouth to offer clarification or a counterpoint, but Osteen, undeterred, pressed on with increasing intensity. He spewed a barrage of phrases louder and faster, as if the volume and speed could somehow overpower Roumie. "Don't twist this like the rest of you do," he barked. "I've heard your sermons. They're soft on personal conviction and brutal on self-reliance. It's performative evangelism, not genuine guidance." His tone brimmed with hostility, a mixture of outrage and dismissiveness. Throughout this barrage, Roumie remained silent, choosing instead to let him speak. He allowed the din of Osteen's words to swell, knowing intuitively that Osteen was unaware of what was happening beneath the surface. Eventually, the crowd, whether in the studio or in the audience, began to tune out Osteen's words. They weren't truly listening to what he was saying anymore. Instead, they observed how he said it. His escalation, his rising volume betrayed his true state of mind. When he finally paused to catch his breath, Roumie leaned forward slightly, his demeanor calm and deliberate, and then addressed him directly. "Mr. Osteen," he began, his voice steady and measured, "the first mistake you're making is pretending my portrayal or advocacy is about judging others. It's not. It's about authentic faith and connection. The same authentic faith you preach from your pulpit, but seem to forget when you seek to diminish others." His tone was firm but composed, devoid of any emotional spikes or vengeful undertones, simply clear and precise. Osteen smirked in response, attempting to regain control. He snapped back at Roumie more quickly this time, his voice rising again, trying to dominate the space. "You're here to play the piety card," he accused. "You're here to make established ministries the enemy. Save your talking points. This isn't a theological debate." His words carried a dismissive, almost contemptuous edge. But Roumie's expression remained unchanged, calm, confident, unwavering. "Actually," he corrected him softly but with authority, "I'm here because you invited me." His voice carried a subtle challenge. "And if you'd let me finish my answer instead of narrating your own outrage, perhaps your audience would hear something new, something they haven't been told 100 times before." In the studio booth, an intern watching intently from her monitor saw a shift in the dynamic. For the first time, Osteen's confident bluster seemed to falter. He appeared to be the one truly flailing. Roumie, despite never raising his voice once during the exchange, was somehow prevailing, not through volume nor through dominance, but through mastery of control. Osteen, in contrast, was becoming louder, but not sharper. His voice climbed higher each time Roumie paused, mistaking his stillness for hesitation, his calmness for weakness. What Osteen failed to realize was that Roumie's composure was a strategic choice. He carefully selected every word, deliberately, allowing Osteen's own noise to echo long enough to become self-destructive, to collapse under its own weight. Every time Osteen interrupted him, Roumie responded by lowering his voice, drawing back into himself, centered and patient. Each attempt Osteen made to corner him, Roumie subtly retreated, waited silently, and then responded with quiet confidence. This was not passivity, it was control, an artful command of the conversation's rhythm and flow. Inside the studio, the producer leaned closer to the glass, observing this pattern with a mixture of familiarity and admiration. He had seen similar tactics before, but never from someone sitting across from Osteen. Most guests, faced with such volume and intensity, would panic, speak over him, or desperately try to regain dominance. They would fight for the microphone for the room's attention. But Roumie was different. He wasn't chasing after the mic. Instead, he was pacing the entire dialogue, orchestrating its tempo. Roumie remained utterly composed, his gaze steady and unwavering, as if nothing in the room could disturb his focus. Meanwhile, I had witnessed him make tough decisions countless times under intense pressure. Decisions that carried real consequences, unlike the staged debates or radio calls I had been involved in. His voice was subdued, almost whisper-like, yet every word he uttered struck with a precision that could cut through the thickest fog of rhetoric, sharper than any volume or loudness could achieve. Osteen, eager to assert himself, tried to interject, but there was a fleeting shift in his expression, a momentary realization that he was no longer in control. He saw, perhaps too late, that Roumie was not reacting to him, but was instead leading the exchange effortlessly. His confidence waned as he began to slow up into a defensive stance, unaware of his own decline. In a desperate attempt to regain footing, Osteen launched into another attack. This time, blending moral commentary with personal insults, he accused with disdain those like Roumie of harboring a desire to vilify traditional values, romanticize spiritual ambiguity, and transform the nation into what he called a secular moral wasteland, a vivid, exaggerated caricature of the very debates that divide us. Roumie, unfazed, tilted his head slightly, a subtle gesture that subtly shifted the entire atmosphere of the room. Although his voice remained even and his tone calm, the energy changed. The unspoken tension in the air grew perceptible. He did not flinch, did not lean away. Instead, he calmly posed a simple but piercing question. What exactly do you mean by people like me? That single, succinct inquiry struck like a lightning bolt, instantly draining the room of its previous bravado. It was a sentence so precise, so pointed, that it seemed to momentarily snatch the air itself from the space between them. Osteen blinked, not because he lacked an answer, but because he had not fully grasped the weight of what he had just implied. His mind scrambled to respond. His mouth moved, attempting to craft a comeback, but the words caught in his throat, sounding risky and uncertain now. He tried to pivot to shift the narrative. I mean performers, influencers, whatever label you want to use. People who trade genuine faith for fashionable trends, he said, attempting to clarify and soften his stance. You know what I meant, but the damage was already done. Roumie did not raise his voice or make a dramatic gesture. He simply looked at him with quiet authority and urged, then finished the thought. His tone was devoid of any performative bravado. It was neither a trap nor a challenge. Instead, it was an invitation, an open door for Osteen to articulate clearly what he truly believed. Hesitant, Osteen stumbled, repeating himself, trying to dig his way out of the hole he had dug. I've written books, advised leaders, taken calls from inside the Oval Office, he asserted. You think that suddenly makes me the bad guy? Roumie remained silent, his expression unreadable, but he didn't need to speak. Osteen's unraveling was evident for all to see. He had in essence handed himself over without even realizing it, turning Roumie's calm question into his own moment of reckoning. Roumie had given him space, a moment to reflect, and Osteen had chosen instead to weaponize it, showing the world exactly what he stood for. The audience, watching silently, didn't need anyone to declare a verdict aloud. The truth was in the subtle shift of energy, in the way his confidence crumbled under Roumie's steady gaze. Osteen had walked directly into his own downfall, and all it took was Roumie's simple, pointed question. Desperately, Osteen reached for the semblance of control that credentials and titles had provided, his usual fallback. I have been on air for 25 years, he boasted, voice booming with a pleading tone. I've taught millions from my pulpit. I've interviewed countless figures. Millions trust me. Yet despite his loud words and authoritative posture, a palpable change was taking place. The bulldozer persona he tried to project was fading, replaced by a man desperately trying to justify his relevance in this conversation to prove he still held the right to steer the discussion. Roumie, however, chose not to escalate or match his bravado. Instead, he calmly opened a folder resting on the table before him, retrieved 2 sheets of paper, and spoke in a tone that was as composed as it was firm. As an actor, he began, his voice steady and unemotional, like a narrator reciting established truths. I have delved into countless stories of the human spirit, seeking to embody truths that resonate far beyond any courtroom or legislative chamber. I have portrayed characters whose journeys have touched millions, offering solace and inspiration. He paused briefly, then continued. I have worked directly with individuals and communities whose stories often go unheard, offering them a voice through my art. a platform far beyond the carefully curated narratives you present. His words conveyed authority and experience grounded in reality rather than bravado. The power of storytelling, particularly in portraying characters of profound faith, serves multiple vital purposes. It not only bolsters empathy, but also fosters a culture where spiritual journeys are explored with nuance, ultimately leading to improved understanding and connection within diverse audiences. When these portrayals are authentic and accessible, they contribute to a more open environment where viewers and individuals alike can understand diverse spiritual experiences, what challenges followed, and how future acts of compassion might be inspired. Such authenticity is essential because it provides a reflection that remains accessible to everyone, publicly available and impossible to obscure, ensuring that the core truths of human experience are preserved beyond the fleeting moments of cultural trends or superficial judgment. Often people glance at headlines or summaries and form opinions without delving into the details, missing the critical context that only a thorough portrayal can provide. In a particular scenario, Roumie looked at Osteen with a demeanor that was neither angry nor condescending, but simply disappointed. His expression conveyed a quiet, profound disapproval that needed no words. Meanwhile, Osteen, observing the exchange, shook his head with a mixture of amusement and disbelief, almost laughing at the futility of the moment. He questioned the power of personal narrative, whether the lived experiences and nuanced portrayals truly held any meaningful weight in the larger scheme of spiritual guidance or universal truth. Roumie in turn acknowledged that while these stories and portrayals might not always sway emotional reactions or immediate opinions, they endure far longer and carry weight that transcends fleeting outbursts. At that point, a whisper from behind the glass caught attention. The producer, sensing the significance of what was unfolding, murmured that they had stumbled upon something genuinely compelling, a breakthrough that could redefine the narrative. This was no longer merely a heated debate or a clash of opinions. It was a breakdown, an undeniable collapse of words and rhetoric under the weight of incontrovertible facts and authentic human experience. And Roumie was prevailing not through emotional appeals, but with concrete artistic truth. He was winning because his foundation was authenticity, while Osteen had no genuine insights left to counter him with. The tone and direction of the discourse shifted visibly. The initial vigor of Osteen's voice persisted, but it was no longer the dominant force in the room. His words became shorter, more defensive, scattered, like a faltering attempt to maintain control. His frustration grew. He snapped at Roumie, accusing him of twisting his words, perhaps seeking a soundbite, a snippet that could trend on TikTok or garner quick online attention. Roumie, however, did not respond with sensational headlines or provocative remarks. Instead, he chose silence, an act of quiet strength that spoke volumes beyond words. Then, the moment reached its climax. Osteen, visibly red-faced, rose from behind his desk, pointing a finger and shouting that he was out of line. The room fell into a tense stillness, an almost palpable pause that stretched for a second or more where no one moved. Roumie remained seated, unmoved, his composure intact, unshaken by the outburst. He looked up slowly with a calm and measured gaze and delivered a line that would resonate far beyond that room, possibly replayed in slow motion across countless screens and platforms within the hour. His words were clear, unwavering. "Mr. Osteen, you're leaving." This was not a reactive outburst, but a deliberate declaration, final, definitive, and without sarcasm or anger. His tone conveyed authority and certainty. The silence that ensued was not awkward but precise, almost surgical in its impact. Without hesitation, he stood, unclipped his microphone, and met Osteen's gaze directly. His final words were simple but powerful. "Thank you for having me. I believe your audience has learned everything they needed to know about both of us." The camera continued to roll, capturing the moment in its raw authenticity, but the event was over. His departure marked the end of the show. Osteen sat frozen in his chair, utterly speechless. For nearly 10 seconds, he did not speak or move, as if the weight of Roumie's words had rendered him temporarily speechless. Then finally, he muttered under his breath, "Guess that's what happens when you ask tough questions." Yet his attempt at dismissing the event as merely a result of challenging inquiries fell flat. Nobody believed it. Not his staff, not the social media commentators, and certainly not his own audience. Because Roumie had not simply walked out, he had entered history. Within moments, clips of the exchange flooded social media platforms. Twitter, TikTok, and late-night talk shows all picked up the story. The three words he uttered, "Mr. Osteen, you're leaving," began to circulate widely, often accompanied by bold captions and stunned reaction videos. Commentators scrutinized every frame and gesture, some defending Osteen, accusing him of an ambush. But the majority recognized what had truly transpired. Roumie had not resorted to yelling, posturing, or dirty tactics. He had listened patiently, waited for his moment, disarmed his opponent through. If you want to keep seeing deep dives into media strategy and sharp breakdowns of tense public moments like this one, then you've found the right channel. We focus on the strategy behind the spotlight, bringing clarity to the chaos. Don't miss our next analysis. Hit the subscribe button right now and turn on notifications so you're the first to know when we post. Let us know in the comments below, what was your reaction to Roumie's final line, "Mr. Osteen, you're leaving"? Subscribe now and join the discussion.